Well, welcome back, everyone. And I think, Kalina, I think we have just about everyone here. And as Fiona said, we've got a little bit less time. We've got 33 minutes plus to talk about auditor reporting. We've got the questions that hopefully now have appeared on your screen. And I think we actually in the previous session have talked about a couple of these questions a little bit, but this discussion will be focused specifically on the auditor's report, the content of the auditor's report, and perceptions about the usefulness of the information that's being provided, and perhaps what more can be done. Talk specifically about going concern there in question 3. But I think, as all of you know now, this, I'll call it the extended or new auditor's report, has been in effect now, at least based on the international standards, for 4 years. A little bit less in certain countries, a little bit more in others. And the first question there, and I'm guessing that all of you have had an opportunity to have a look at this new auditor reporting format. So the question there is fairly broad in terms of do you believe that the information that's being provided now is useful, and in what ways, and has it affected your belief about the confidence in the quality of the audit performed, either individually or based on what you have heard in your own marketplaces, reactions of others to the auditor's report. So, anyone willing to kick off this discussion? This is a fairly broad question, then we'll get a little more granular as we go along here. Anyone in general perceptions in terms of the usefulness of the auditor report currently?
Well, George again.
Go ahead, George. Kick us off here.
Okay. The answer in general is that the report we have today is certainly better than what we had. I would say that the other was maybe very, very much hermetic. I mean, while this one brings a broader view of certain relevant matters that is going to be discussed here, the accounts, for example, also the scope of the work performed. Therefore, in general terms, I view it has been enhanced the information to the public, and definitely is a better report. I'm not sure it is has increased confidence with respect to the public. I think that it's still something that the public have not enough knowledge or enough communication or enough education, if I can say that, to understand and to read what the differences are, what the new contents are, what are the aggregation. Certainly, specialized people, certainly they do, but I'm talking in a broader sense. So it's really a better report, but I'm not sure in the general public it enhances the confidence. To the specialist, yes, it's a better report.
Yeah. Thanks, George. And that's a good way to kick off this discussion, I think. And maybe your last point there about, it's again speaking to the knowledge gap, I believe. Perhaps a better understanding about roles and responsibilities. And I presume that you mean not only the auditor's responsibilities, but perhaps management's responsibilities, or how the two interact as well. That kind of came through, I think, in some of the discussion in the last breakout as well.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay. Others, on that particular point, either just the overall usefulness or that last bit on confidence in the quality of the audit.
And it's funny. I think it very much depends on who is the addressee. So if I'm talking to management or if I talk to the audit committee, there is a huge interest, especially in the key audit matters and the way how they're described and the audit answers. Now we need to appreciate that, and that's particular and specific for Germany. In this environment, we also have a long form report that goes along with the auditor's report. So further information there. If I'm moving away from management and those charged with governance, and if we look at the investors or the users, I fear, and I know you personally have been very much involved in ISO 701, but if we look at the investors and the users, they still look, is it an unqualified opinion, yes or no? They do not really go into the details. So we do have this issue of a knowledge gap with regards to especially the key audit matters as I described. And what I'm seeing in Europe also as the further tendency, which the auditor's report cannot really address, is that non-financial information is getting more and more important. So we're going into what is being part of the management commentary, sustainability reporting, and others. So ECG reporting at the end of the day. These are tendencies I'm seeing. And then if I look at that in a multi-year scale, it is quite some work as you initially apply the new standard. And then you define the key audit matters, and you go for the audit responses, and you go for precise wording. But then as you go into the further years to continue, and even though we're all aware we should make changes to the key audit matters, we're on a sort of a plateau, if I can call it this way. So we have a much better report, but it is not necessarily developing and evolving as significantly as before. So we're staying on this plateau, and also the issues reported as key audit matters stay very, very similar compared to prior years. So this is what I'm observing in Europe.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sven. And that probably is a good bridge to the second question, because you mentioned key audit matters, and I think already just based on academic studies and other reports that have been issued by standard setters and other organizations around the world, there are certainly differing views about the usefulness of what's being disclosed or communicated, even for key audit matters. But I think, Sven, you mentioned a couple of things about CAMs, and essentially, I think your point is that perhaps in the very early stages, there was a lot of time and effort given to that particular disclosure in the auditor's report, and perhaps maybe it's plateaued a bit. There was always a concern about that the communication not perhaps evolving over time, becoming a little more boilerplate. But I'd like some views of others in terms of question 2. Just on the key audit matters themselves, and what you're seeing, and what maybe more can be done to improve the usefulness of that communication in the auditor's report.
So Dan, you mentioned the academic research, and I'll just mention really briefly, there has been some interesting academic research on CAMs. One line of research has found that when auditors disclose CAMs, that it does affect users as they look through the financial statements. So they had users examining the financial statements in the presence of CAMs in particular areas and not, and found that those users actually paid more attention to the areas of the financial statements that had to do with those critical audit matters. And so I would see that as a success. If the idea is to draw user attention to those areas that are particularly difficult, it looks like that it actually does that, and they focus in more on those areas of the financial statements. On a flip side, interestingly enough, most research to this point has concluded that there was a concern about CAMs and the effect on liability exposure. Most of the research to this point suggests that, if anything, there's a protective effect, that mentioning a CAM is almost seen as a disclaimer by prospective jurors, and that maybe auditors are actually held less liable when material misstatements that were undiscovered pop up in those areas that relate to a CAM that's been disclosed. So just throwing in a couple things relating to the audit research, that it appears that CAMs may very well have some impacts in at least those two areas.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. And I know both of those points were clearly talked about quite a bit. During the course of the IAASB's discussions leading up to these new reporting standards. Both what the effect would be for users and others in terms of drawing attention to those particular areas of the financial statements that were talked about in the key audit matters section of the auditor's report. And then, of course, as we all expected, there was a lot of concern about auditor liability. So it's good to know that at least academic research perhaps is bearing out that that there's less concern there. And frankly, I don't think there's been much from concern raised by the audit firms themselves. Anyone else in terms of key audit matters? And I know part of what the IAASB will be looking for here as they consider whether any further changes may be needed in these auditor reporting standards is whether there is a need to do anything more to enhance the key audit matters communication. I think Sven highlighted the kind of the boilerplate nature and certain countries, for example, the UK, I think, and others have done a little bit more to try to keep that section fresh, tie it in with what the those charged with governance are doing, what audit committees are reporting and the like, and that seems to help. But any other thoughts on key audit matters there? Certainly that input will be useful to the IAASB.
Dan, if I may, maybe for the interest of others, I'd like to mention a report that we launched as ACCA back in 2018, which we did similar to a post-implementation review that the FRC has done in the UK, but we've done it across 10 countries. We've looked at 560 auditors' reports, and specifically looking at CAMs. And I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but a few things that came out was firstly, because they link very closely to what has been said, there is some positive things that came out is that there is a better governance because of the discussions that are happening at the earliest stage. There is an enhanced corporate governance, which does show what that objective was achieved. Also, it does support a better corporate reporting, which that one is quite interesting because back to the point that was made that users go back to the notes of the financial statements, that makes the financial reporting being more cautious of what they are disclosing. So that was a very positive outcome that came out, which we highlighted in the report, and obviously a very important point is the impact on audit quality. I happened to run the roundtables that happened at the time of this report, and because of the complexity that it created for firms to adopt for the first time, it really focused them to be more skeptical when they are dealing with CAMs, and that definitely had a positive impact. Now, back to the point on the boilerplate, that's a really important point, and that would be an important aspect. How do we keep that live as we move forward. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I mean, clearly the ACCA work and report has been one of the key things that the IAASB will focus on. And just full transparency, I was when I was on the board and as deputy chair was also the chair of the auditor reporting task force that was responsible for these new standards. So this is all very important and personal for me as well. And Kalina and I are spearheading the task force effort on the post-implementation review. So, this particular work that Antonis mentioned will certainly be a key aspect of one of many things that's being looked at, and that will be feeding back to the board. But it's good to know that at least in the positives that you summarized, I think is some of the key things, the key objectives that the IAASB had in mind: better governance, better conversations, be among the part of the I'll call it the three legs of the stool: management, those charged with governance, and the auditors. Kind of a link to better financial reporting quality, and with management giving more consideration to those areas of the financial statements and what's being disclosed. And certainly the impact on audit quality. And I think as George mentioned earlier, perhaps the jury is a little bit out and views might be mixed in that regard. But I think it's positive to know, at least through this particular study, that auditors were paying a little more attention when they're dealing with those matters that were being communicated as key audit matters. Anyone want to comment further on that, or perhaps anyone want to comment on any negatives that you've heard in that ACCA study? I don't recall the specifics, but were there some negatives that came out of that? Mentioned the kind of the boilerplate nature, but anything beyond that the group should be talking about.
Just going back to that, Dan. Some discussion was back to the point that was made that indeed users are still focusing on whether the report is qualified or not. So that's one important point. However, the most of the discussions were leaning towards positive aspects, to be honest, and because I was leading most of the roundtables, I can say that any negative aspects came from the auditor's point of view as preparers of those reports, because of the how much work they actually needed to do, and it was interesting to see how that was developed in different countries, because as you correctly mentioned in the beginning, some of them adopted it quite at a later stage, which on the one hand, it helped them because they had the examples of others, but on the other hand, they realized what was the complexity of doing it when they actually tried to implement.
Yeah. Thanks for that. And it just based on the point that you just mentioned and the point that George mentioned earlier, in terms of certainly some users still focusing on the opinion itself. Is there a sense that at least the positioning of the opinion first in this new auditor's report actually helps in that regard? I know one of the things that came up throughout the course of the discussions was, well, yes, it will help some that the opinion is placed first because that's what many users are interested in, but perhaps it will have a negative effect that they won't look at anything else. So any comments in that regard, that all the other useful information that's in the auditor's report may not be getting as much attention because of for those that are focused only on the opinion. And Sven, I don't know if you have or George, if you have a thought on that.
Yes, but I would say that the CAMs are, let's say, very much discussed in forums that previously we didn't have that happening. For example, when you meet with those charged with governance, either board of directors, either audit committees, or even management, it has raised a lot of important matters, recommendations, discussions. And in that regard, I think that these people at least are looking more than just at the audit opinion. Okay? I have been meeting also with certain investors, and when you get to, let's say, specific meetings, particular meetings, focused meetings, they do want to know more, and the aspects mentioned in the camps are brought to the table for, let's say, a broader discussions. Again, I think it's a process of education, and I feel that the new model of the report, having the opinion ahead, then commenting on key audit matters, and then describing, generally speaking, the other aspects of an audit has enhanced. It is still perhaps in the early stages. At the beginning of such discussions of the key audit matters, there was a lot of, let's say, dispute, because auditors were not really positioning themselves if that subject would really enhance or not, or would impact or not the overall report. But I think that has been a progress too. So I feel comfortable with what we have today for this specialized public, I would say. For the general investor, then I think it has not reached yet that level.
Okay. Well, that's very good discussion. I think by and large have covered off questions 1 and 2 here. The question 3 ties in obviously with previous discussions on going concern, and I think Fiona mentioned or Josephine mentioned in her opening remarks that there clearly is linkage between the auditor's responsibilities, management's responsibilities for going concern, and the transparency of what is being communicated in the auditor's report. So this question has multiple pieces. One is certainly focusing on what's there today, and aside from some additional description of management and auditor responsibilities for going concern, this separate section on material uncertainty frankly isn't all that much different from what we had previously. There was an emphasis of matter paragraph that was required when material uncertainty existed. Now there's a little more spotlight given to that by putting it in a separate section with a separate heading. So I guess I'll just throw it open to any comments or reactions about the current requirements and the current information that's provided in the auditor's report on going concern, and what else about going concern might be useful to enhance transparency. And maybe my last point before I throw it open for discussion is linking back to our previous breakout discussion, and that is that it's again to be cautious about or perhaps be cautious about what more is added, because there is a perceived lack of understanding of certain terminology, and it may be misinterpreted what the auditors might be saying if more is added, but certainly would like reactions from the group on question 3.
Then I think it goes back to the ecosystem as we alluded to before on the other breakout, because on the first hand side, it is really up to companies' management to comment on going concern. I think that needs to be more straight-lined, and we need to have a direct statement and confirmation by management. That would be outside the auditor's report. The other part is also something that I would more see to the accounting standard setter to be more precise on what is going to be expected, also disclosure-wise. And then the real asset test is going to be seen now in 2020 as we go through all the COVID development and all the uncertainty going along with that. So I expect that the going concern description and the reporting is going to be enhanced for this year. And for these circumstances, the specific section that we have in the auditor's report is going to be very, very helpful, not leading into self-fulfilling prophecy, but making clear what to expect and which challenges companies and auditors are going to have in this very specific situation.
Yeah, Sven, thanks very much for that. And I know there's a linkage here also back to key audit matters, because one of the many things that the IAASB talked about on going concern, this communication in the auditor report, was it's this self-fulfilling prophecy that if the key audit matters section used the words going concern, that it would be a trigger that there was a problem, even though there might not have been a material uncertainty. So there was a discussion about, what types of things could be communicated as key audit matters when there were some events or conditions or areas of the financial statements where there were some issues that could ultimately result in a material uncertainty for going concern, but you're not quite there yet. The so-called close calls. And I don't know, Sven or others in your experience, if you've seen any instances or even in the ACCA report or others examples that have been looked at of key audit matters that were talking about some of the underlying financial statement areas, whether it might be problems with long-term debt or something else that ultimately could lead to a significant doubt about ability to continue as a going concern, but again, not quite there yet. I don't know if anyone has any comments in that regard.
Dan, I haven't seen it in the past, but if I look at specific industries, specifically in 2020, so if we look at transportation, if we look at tourism, etc., I simply expect that this is going to come, while for other industries it might not be as significant. So the going concern description will be enhanced, and we're going to see it probably for the first time much more intensified in 2020, or for the 2020 accounting period.
How are we doing on time here? And Kalina, by the way, since you and I are so closely involved with this post-implementation effort, if you have any thoughts or want to add anything, please feel free to do so, or any of the other observers, please feel free to chime in here. But we do have a few minutes left to talk about the very last question. And that is, what else, if anything, might be considered to be added to the auditor's report that might help to address this knowledge gap, better understanding of the audit that was performed. Certainly, there was some a lot of thought that went into what's there currently, striking a balance between making that report more useful and not overloading it to the point that it would be so long that users would simply not want to read it. But some of the additional information, for example, that has been considered. One would be following the UK model of disclosing the materiality that's been used by the auditor. And that's just one example. Perhaps more about internal control and what the auditor is doing there. But any observations either on those couple of points or anything else that you believe might be further useful in the auditor's report to enhance the understanding about the audit? Anyone? And maybe we can focus on materiality for just a moment. Clearly, that is not an IAASB requirement. It is in the UK, and I think my understanding is that there have been some mixed views in terms of the usefulness of that information, but many users, investors, and others have indicated that they find that information helpful. Auditors have expressed some concern because it's a fairly not well understood concept outside of the auditing profession. Overall financial statement materiality, perhaps, but not so much performance materiality and how that is determined to drive the scope of the audit work. But any reactions on materiality and whether that might be useful as a piece of the auditor's report?
I have recently participated in a discussion here in South America, in Brazil, with the insurance regulators. Who are very much trying to follow what has been happening in UK with the disclosure. The discussions was quite intense because definitely there is a view that it's a very complex matter with various angles and probably would cause further confusion on a subject that is not well understood by the investors, by the market, in general speaking. On the other hand, some believe that talking about materiality would give, let's say, parameters for their analysis that are quite relevant, which today they are kind of, let's say, lost in the specifics. So this is really a very complex discussion. It's going on down here, following whatever is happening in UK. But again, I mean, I think it's still a long shot, my view.
Okay, so perhaps George, with that point, maybe there's more discussion that the IAASB could have looking at what is happening around the world, but not a given that should be added to the auditor's report. Well, I think we, by and large, have covered what we need to, and I think the breakout rooms will be shutting down here momentarily. Thank you again for all of your input.